This is Krusty the Clown, real name Herschel Krustofsky. He is the most popular children's entertainer in Springfield. The kids love him. He's been entertaining them for something like 60 years now. His material for adults? Well, it's not quite as good. Despite being a clown, Krusty is not a happy individual. He has a very complicated history with his father and his own faith. He has a daughter he barely ever sees. He has a history of gambling, womanizing, and putting his name on crappy merchandise. He is generally terrible with his money, losing everything frequently, and regularly quitting show business or being fired. And yet somehow, Krusty does not come off as being the most terrible person in Springfield. Thanks, Mo. He creates this weird blend of total enthusiasm and complete indifference that is so compelling to watch. This is the history of Krusty the Clown. Krusty the Clown is probably the most unique character in the show's history, in terms of his presentation and his character development. When you think of him, he feels very actualized as a character right from the start. Krusty is always Krusty. He's not like Nelson, who softened up or changed over time. Krusty has always been that lovable rogue, right from Season 1. He has the honor of being the very first secondary character who gets his own spotlight episode. We get a sense of who he is right away. From Season 2 onward, it was all about tweaking and expanding upon his archetype. Let's go back to the very beginning. Krusty's first appearance was in a Tracy Ullman short, where the kids attend one of his tapings. After that, the actual series itself plays it very cool with Krusty in terms of his actual involvement in plots. He's sort of a background institution. His picture is seen in episodes like Homer's Odyssey and Bart the General. He's just kind of a thing, part of the setting and fabric of Springfield. His first actual speaking role is in The Telltale Head. We see the flashback of him distressed about the theft of Jebediah Springfield's head. Just a kids show host right now, just a concerned citizen of Springfield. Then we get Krusty Gets Busted, the episode where he really gets defined as a character. Look how much gets established right here. His developing relationship with Sideshow Bob, his relationship with Bart, his show's relationship with Itchy and Scratchy, the sheer amount of merchandising he has done, his heart attack, his illiteracy, his gambling. All of this is brought into his character. This episode is more or less an introduction to these elements, however. They don't portray his gambling as an addiction, they don't portray his merchandising super cynically. We do get a ton of crappy merchandise jokes in the future, like Camp Krusty was all about this angle, but for now, this is just the introduction. Then in Seasons 2 and 3, they start pulling on these threads. They show off his business ties to Roger Myers and Itchy and Scratchy and Marge. They have him become a total shill for Mount Splashmore and Brush with Greatness. Now, 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 now! They even have him angrily field questions about the water park fiasco and the tainted Krusty brand mayonnaise. We start getting jokes like the Krusty Hotline and Stark Raving Dad in Season 3. And then we get Like Father, Like Clown. I would argue this is really where Krusty gets fully formed as the character we know and love today. They bring in his backstory with his father and Judaism. Most importantly though, it brings in a level of sadness to his character that we hadn't quite gotten yet. It's mostly been adult-themed content and general cynicism. Here's where we learn that Krusty is kind of a miserable person, that he drinks and womanizes because there's a lot of pain there. This is a very natural direction for this kind of entertainer character to go. There's the stereotype of the sad clown, the children's entertainer, or the stand-up comedian who is unhappy and jaded. The entertainment business is very stressful, very competitive. It makes a lot of sense that the occupation of always smiling and always being on will take its toll on someone, especially when they have unresolved personal issues. As a result, we see a pattern with Krusty-focused episodes. Krusty self-destructs, does something terrible, and usually redeems himself in the end. You look at how far back he slides when he gets cancelled, how fat he gets, only to take it all back in the end. He'll gamble away his daughter's violin, and then sneak into the mob's hideout and get it back. Even the modern episodes are like this. The Princess Penelope episode did it twice, actually. He gets depressed about girly stuff, then he gets together with her. He breaks it off at their wedding, but then returns to her in France in the end. A similar thing happens with his agent in Season 23. The only episode that doesn't really follow this pattern is The Last Temptation of Krust in Season 9. In that one, he refuses to sell out, but then sells out anyway because the Canyonero is awesome. But in general, Krusty's episodes tend to be kind of like Moe's: cynicism, self-destruction, followed by a somewhat uplifting ending. At least by Krusty's standards. That being said, Krusty as a supporting character tends to be black comedy and black comedy only. Think about Bart Gets Famous, where he's clearly taking advantage of his popularity and then shuts the door on Bart in the end. Or Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie, that ends with him celebrating Poochie's death. Or in Yokel Chords in Season 18, where he's clearly exploiting Cletus's kids. He's obviously not an uplifting character in support, he just shows up for an entertainment joke, a degeneracy joke, or if the plot needs a token Jew. After introducing his Jewish heritage and upbringing, it mostly stays in the background. Krusty's faith doesn't define his character or anything, but they do develop an arc around it and his father. In Season 15's Today I Am a Clown, Krusty finally has his bar mitzvah. It's an episode less about his relationship with his dad, it's just more of an attempt to do something with this aspect of Krusty's character. Rabbi Krustovsky passes away in the premiere episode of Season 26, a very shocking death that no one saw coming. This one was more or less a sequel to their first episode, this time Krusty questioning if his father actually found him funny. It doesn't really add anything new to their dynamic, they already kind of accepted each other for who they were, but it did give Krusty some closure, I guess. His dad appears in a dream sequence in Season 28, after Krusty temporarily converts to Christianity. It's honestly a pretty forgettable cameo. This was also the episode where his daughter Sophie comes back, even though Drew Barrymore doesn't reprise her role. To be honest, they really try to cram Krusty into a Christmas episode, and the whole thing comes off as kinda arbitrary and weird. I don't know about this one. Sideshow Bob is obviously the other major relationship for Krusty. During their early years, it's fun watching the writers go back and forth on these two together. First having them reconcile on TV and go to Bob's wedding, then Krusty voting for him, but then Bob tries to kill him in Season 7. After that, whenever they bring back Bob, they try to add a little wrinkle to the dynamic. We get to see Krusty reject Cecil and hire Bob. Then in Day of the Jackanapes, they reconcile for real this time, in a somewhat confusing bait and switch. Krusty is mostly indifferent to the Sideshow Bob era, which is, to be frank, totally in character for him, but then gets kinda nostalgic in his final show and gives a tribute to Bob. Okay, sure. But to the show's credit, they've pretty much stuck to this change since doing it. The two hang out together in Wedding for Disaster, and Bob even attends Rabbi Krustovsky's funeral. Aww. This is where I talk about Krusty's relationship with Bart, but Krusty barely even remembers who he is. So instead, let's visit the Krusty the Clown show and its various machinations. As a whole, it's been portrayed fairly consistently as purely a kids show, one with little skits and pranks and sideshow male abuse. They do a couple specials early on, where it's more of a primetime talk show thing. The format change is explained pretty well in Universe. The weirdest episode, in terms of portrayal, is Bart Gets Famous, where now Krusty seems to be doing a sketch show for adults with discerning tastes in comedy. They kinda have to do this to make Bart's I didn't do it thing go mainstream. It's just weird they didn't clarify this as a late show or something. They actually combine the two types of comedy together in a later episode, where Krusty basically does a nostalgia show for adults. This joke has aged very well, by the way, in today's pop culture environment. Now in terms of Krusty's actual history, that's been retconned and affected by the floating timeline pretty significantly. But you can kinda piece together his history in show business through clips and flashbacks. First, he was a street performer in Tupelo, Mississippi. Then he got his first TV appearance on the Milk of Magnesia Summer Cavalcade in 1957. In 1961, he was doing a serious talk show, interviewing everyone's favorite AFL-CIO president, George Meany. In 1963, he started clowning a little more, this time on Robert Frost, who said no. Around this time, or maybe in the 50s, he had a group of kids with him called the Krusketeers on his show. The 1970s brought us Sideshow Raheem, his experimentation with psychedelic drugs, and his appearance on Laugh-In. Honestly, we get a lot of little glances of his shows through the 60s through 90s, with him aping whatever was popular at the time. We shouldn't forget his interruption of his show in 1982, when the Falklands had been invaded. I repeat, the Falklands had been invaded. And then there's his ill-fated Krusty Burger contest in the 1984 Olympics. And finally, he does a USO show in Iraq during the Gulf War in the early 90s. The strangest retcon to Krusty's past happened in Season 23's The 10% Solution, where they show young adult Krusty doing stand-up. It's his first manager who convinces him to move into clowning. Up to that point in the series, he had consistently been portrayed as being into clowning from a young age. You could argue that maybe this is a gap in his adult history, where he initially struggles, temporarily gives it up, and then returns to it. Maybe the writers changed their mind. Who knows? We also tend to see Krusty without his makeup in these flashbacks. According to Krusty, this ain't makeup, which implies that his heart attack caused his skin to naturally look pale. The writers have basically stuck with this since then. We do see his yellow skin as Rory B. Bellows, but then it's revealed to actually be yellow makeup. The big point of contention with this is his Season 1 episode. It kind of feels like the writers changed their mind on this aspect in the Merkin era, and then Oakley and Weinstein and later showrunners just kind of went with it. In my opinion, Krusty doesn't wear makeup, but I can see why people would say that he does. The main thing with Krusty is that he's an opportunity to do jokes about show business. That's really his bread and butter as a character. He shows up a lot in the Itchy and Scratchy episodes, either as a consultant or being completely abandoned by them. The writers are especially fond of watching Krusty bomb in almost every format possible. I feel like this is one of his most interesting aspects. There's this whole sentiment about him being this unfunny clown, like that's his stereotype. He most certainly steals jokes, does lazy stereotypes and stuff, but they're pretty consistent about how the kids absolutely love what he does. It's somewhat rare for Krusty to bomb in front of the kids. I would argue that, as bad as Krusty is from an artistic standpoint, he's actually kind of amazing at his job. But don't get me wrong, that's the only thing he's good at. When he does stand up and burns the casino, he bombs. His Krusty comedy classic, bombs. His SNL appearance, bombs. The guy can't even make it through the national anthem. This dynamic is the whole reason they made the Season 9 episode, to deconstruct Krusty bombing in front of adults. And oh boy, does he. Oof. It's a really fun dynamic, how his success has given him the opportunity to spread his wings and try new things, but he hasn't perfected his craft enough to really succeed at anything else. It's gotta be pretty frustrating getting stuck in one kind of comedy your entire career. I would argue that the biggest problem with Krusty as a character, and what the writers struggle with a little, is repetition of similar plots. I mean, to be fair, Krusty is in television. It's his job to be repetitive. His job. Repetitiveness is his job. But it's fair to say, he hits on similar crises over and over and over again. Either something threatens his show, he gets cancelled, he quits, someone takes his job, etc., etc. Krusty's quitting show business because adults don't find him funny. Now he's quitting because he's getting too many notes. Now he's being cancelled in favor of Homer's talk show. Now Lisa's stealing his job. Now Princess Penelope is taking over the show. Now he's fired because Itchy and Scratchy are more popular than him. Oh, now his father has passed away. Alright, that's a different story for him. Oh wait, now he's retiring because he's too sad. Come on, guys. It makes sense. I shouldn't criticize them too much. When you do an episode about an entertainer like Krusty, obviously a lot of his plots are going to revolve around his show changing in some significant way. They didn't really do a lot of legwork in giving Krusty much of a character outside of the entertainment industry, just a lot of random debauchery. I mean, it would be kind of weird to do an episode focusing on Krusty's debauchery, although maybe they should. But much like Krusty's actual talent level, he's always kind of stayed in his lane on The Simpsons. He's the entertainment guy. He has his role in the series, and to be honest, he fulfills that role extremely, extremely well. What's the problem? I think it's that balance between enthusiasm and total indifference that makes Krusty such a compelling character, balancing that light and dark side of his personality. He can turn it on and off like a light switch. I think they've done a really nice job of portraying the seedier side of his personality, but not straight up making him a villain. Krusty does a lot of bad stuff, arguably more callously than Homer, but no one ever describes jerk-ass Krusty as being a problem on the show. Krusty's callousness is more symptomatic of the entertainment business and capitalism in general. It's all business with him. The jerkassery is already built into his character. We sort of give him a pass sometimes because we acknowledge and understand the darker side of his business, and how people react to being in that system. On a personal level, there's still something in him that knows which lines can't actually be crossed. He's not a fundamentally bad guy, he just has a lot of vices. And these vices are fun, that's really what's most important. In other words, the writers have done a really nice job of keeping the lovable part of our lovable rogue. A few tablespoons of patheticness certainly goes a long way. Krusty has been in tons of episodes by now, so clearly we couldn't cover everything in this breakdown. I didn't even really get a chance to talk about him running for Congress. That's also totally a thing he did. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Krusty moments are, as well as the stuff I kinda missed. Also, let me know who the next character in Springfield that you want me to tackle. I'm thinking next time someone more down-ticket, one of the more minor secondary characters. You know, like in the Reverend Lovejoy or Lionel Hutz area of importance. Or Mr. Johansson. Everyone loves Mr. Johansson. Now if you'll excuse me, it's the Olympics, and I got a free Krusty burger coming to me. Thanks for watching.